energy. Living legends are reaching me. Sharing knowledge with you and me. Teaching us how to lead with Sharon Lee. Sharon Lee. Sharon Lee. On the run. Sharon Lee. Sharon Lee. On the run. Yeah. Keep on building that synergy. One block at a time, you and me. Keep on building that synergy. One block at a time, you and me. Keep on building that synergy. One block at a time, you and me. Keep on building that synergy. One block at a time, you and me.
Happy Friday, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm jamming to my theme song. Don't cut it off. Don't cut it off. Okay, I'm just playing. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome back to the Sharon Lee Briefing Podcast Show. Guys, this is our 26th episode. I am extremely excited for season 1. I mean, we have met some phenomenal people in the DMV, in London, in Canada, just all over the place, guys. But I tell you, the guests we have today, I'm not even going to get into it yet because I want y'all to start sharing this out right now. Share it, share it, share it. If you're my friend over in Facebook, come on over to the Sharon Lee Briefing Podcast Facebook group. If you're watching out there on YouTube, share it with someone out there. Go to the Leading Within with Sharon Lee and share it with everyone because you do not want to miss all of this wonderful information you're going to get today. Guys, y'all know how we do it. We laugh, we learn, and we lead. We have a good time because Fridays are, Sharon Lee on the Run, best day of the week, which is Fridays. We laugh, we learn, but yet we lead as well. I want to always thank our sponsors. I want to thank Crystal Glenn, the Only Greatness Media Production, for just doing what she has been doing for us for 26 episodes, guys, making sure that we show up professionally, making sure that I stay on point and on cue with the podcast, and always just making us look the way we look on screen. I want to thank Dana Parker for creating our theme song, Sharon Lee on the Run. And I also want to thank Sean Parker for all of the stuff he does in the studio, all the lights and all of that. And most importantly, I want to also thank all of you who've come back every Friday at 12 p.m. just to hear what's going on and meet those leading within, what I like to call them, true legacy builders in the community on the Sharon Lee Briefing Podcast Show. So I'm going to give you a few rules. Again, I already shared one. You got to share, guys. You got to share. But remember, if you are out there on Facebook and you're making comments, please make sure you share your name, put your name in the comments so that myself, our audience, and the guests can know who's communicating with them, who's asking questions, who's leaving comments. Please do that for us. And also on YouTube, same thing. Make sure that you share your name and everything. Now, guys, you know how we do it on the Sharon Lee Briefing Podcast Show. We always say to our audience, look, we start with just a little bit about who our keynote speaker is, or what I would call a guest speaker is. Then we share a little bit about their early beginnings, okay, where they're from, how they grew up, all that wonderful stuff. Then we jump into their professional careers, and then we get into that signature component, which is the on-the-run story. Of course, then we find out what's coming up for them next, and you're going to want to hear what's coming up on this platform next for our guests. And then we ask them, how do we connect with you on social media? So that's how the podcast goes. That's how we get down, guys. And I am ready to get started. So, Chris, with no further ado, can you please bring in our guests? Hi, Mr. Snowden. I think you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Actually, I'm not on mute.
Oh, I can hear you now. How are you?
Somewhere between fantastic and great.
See, I love that response. I just love that response. Welcome to Sharon Lee Briefing Podcast Show. Thank you for lending your valuable time to us today. But I like to start by asking, can you just give the audience just a little snippet about who you are? We're going to get into all the interviews, but just tell the audience, who are you?
Right now, I'm serving as a convener for the Caucus of African American Leaders. This is a organization that's made up of a consortium of organizations: NAACP, National Coalition of 100 Black Women, the United Black Clergy, the NAACP, Connecting the Dots, just a host of progressive African American organizations that are seeking to bring about change.
That is amazing. Now, we're going to jump into that profession side, but we want to know, like, no, who are you? Where are you from? Tell us about Mr. Snowden. Who are you?
I'm a native Annapolitan, meaning I grew up here in the city of Annapolis. As you know, Annapolis is the capital of the state of Maryland. Um, I actually have a twin, which most people don't know. I have a twin sister.
Wow.
My mother and my father are both natives of the county. Both are now deceased. My mother lived to be 104 years old.
Wow.
She was able to impart a lot of wisdom into me over the years. I'm a graduate of Lincoln University. I have a master's degree in human services, and I've done a host of different things. I've served in government. I was the first civil rights director for the Office of the Maryland Attorney General. I've served as a member of the Annapolis City Council. I've served as a cabinet member with the first woman who became elected as the county executive for Anne Arundel County.
Wow.
So I've done a lot of things. I worked, probably one of the things that some of your viewing audience may remember, I, for years, did a program on WJZ TV in coming out of Baltimore called Square Off. And it's where we met Oprah Winfrey. She and I worked together when she first got started in her business back in the 70s. And so I remember when Oprah first came to Baltimore, the city.
Wow.
And I remember the challenges she faced as a Black woman trying to break into the showbiz. So I had an opportunity to know her before she became the Oprah. I knew
All right.
Oprah.
Awesome. Well, I tell you what now, before, because we're going to get into some more about who you are, but I always like to give all of our podcast gift what I call a lifetime legacy gift. It's a video production. It's just to kind of share a little bit about your journey. So I hope we were able to capture it to the best of our ability. But I want Chris to keep us on the screen, and I want us to present you with your lifetime legacy gift, and you can let us know what you think about it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So, what you think about it, Mr. Snowden? Did we capture as much as we could? We got a lot to learn, but did we capture as much as we could?
Certainly brings back some fond memories over the years. I've got started as an activist when I was 14 years old. So,
Yes.
um, yeah, they bring back many, many memories, good and bad.
Yeah, I can imagine. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So I want to thank Lisa Dove Washington for joining. She's one of our sponsors. I kind of mentioned at the top of the show. She's one to know. If you want to get like share the shine and get your name out there, that's a one to know. Okay. I also want to thank Cynthia Lane for joining us. She's another one. She works with so many different organizations, and she's really about sharing the spotlight on positive people. So let's just jump into this interview because, guys, it is so much that time won't even allow for us to share the capacity of the story, honestly, in the journey of what I would like to say, Mr. Carl Snowden. I don't like to just call people of leadership by their first name. So honorable Snowden. I just want you to know that I can't stress how honored I am to have you on the show. But like I said earlier, we talk about a little bit about your beginning. So you said you were originally born here in Annapolis, or were you born in Baltimore?
Well, let me explain so that people understand how racism works. Um, I'm a native Annapolitan, but I actually was born in Baltimore City, but it's as a result of racism. What happened was in Annapolis, Maryland, for years, African Americans were not allowed to birth their children at the local Anne Arundel General Hospital. So if you were an African American woman and got pregnant, you were required to go elsewhere to have your child. So many people my age uh, were actually born in Baltimore because at that time, um, hospitals in Annapolis did not accept Black people. In fact,
Wow.
my mother, whose father um, died, he died in part because he had a stroke. He was being taken to Anne Arundel Medical Center. He was denied entrance there and was forced to go to Freeman Hospital, which was in Washington D.C. And along the way, he died. So
Wow.
that's the reason why, although I'm a native Annapolitan, I was actually born in Baltimore City at Johns Hopkins.
Thank you for sharing that and adding that clarity. Guys, y'all know I'm a native of Maryland, born in Calvert County. God, I like to always highlight the year, even though people say, don't tell your age. I'm like, whatever. Okay, so I was born in 1963, and I was 5 years old when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. So those 2 years are some 2 years that stood out in my life that I had to understand what was going on when I was being raised in Calvert County, Maryland. But we'll get into that later as well. So, Mr. Honorable Snowden, do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I've come from a very large family.
Okay.
There were 11 of us. Um, we're now There are now five left, but
Okay.
7 of us. And I grew up on a farm right outside of Annapolis. There's a suburb called Davidsonville, Maryland, um, and I lived there for a while with what we called an extended family. It was actually the property was owned by my grandfather before we'd eventually move into the city of Annapolis.
Okay. And you shared with me that your mom and your dad you kind of shared a little joke with me about your dad's career, but tell us a little bit about your mom and your dad.
Yeah, my mother was a domestic worker. My father worked for the United States Naval Academy. And I jokingly tell people when they say you're an SOB, it's true. I'm the son of a butcher. My father worked for years at the Naval Academy. In fact, he retired there at the Naval Academy. Um, and my mother was a domestic worker. So I
Yeah.
really can understand the struggles that people had. And as I mentioned to you earlier, my mother lived to be 104 years old.
Yes.
So
Thank
she
God.
has seen a lot and was able to impart a lot of information with me.
That's amazing. Well, we're going to try to tap some of that information out to share with our audience. So I'm just excited. My mom was born in 1929, And I remember her, of course, leaving Calvert County. Well, I don't remember her doing it, but she shared with us, and she passed away in 2010. But she had shared that she would always go to Annapolis to shuffle oysters and everything, because that's how, I guess people of color made money working at the oyster, whatever place that was. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, let's take your mother. You said she was born in 1929.
Yes.
And what many people don't realize is that was a year of the Great Depression. My mother was born in 1916.
Mm,
So I asked my mother, who was born in 1916, who was 13 years old during the Great Depression, how did Black people survive?
yeah.
You got to remember is in 1929, there was no social programs, no Social Security, no welfare programs at all. And the way Black people survived the Great Depression of 1929 is it turned toward one another instead of on one another.
Mm,
For example, if you were a farmer and you grew fruits and vegetables, and you had a neighbor who was a fisherman who obviously got their products from the water, you would exchange. It was a barter system.
mm,
So persons who were great seamstresses, those who could sew clothing, would in exchange for eggs and chicken
yes.
exchange their skills. And that was throughout the Black community. And the Black community was a close knitted community. In part, it was close knitted because of racism and
Mm,
segregation. Um, my grandfather, for example, who we lived with, rarely went into the city of Annapolis. And when he did go into the city of Annapolis, it was for business and not for pleasure. So
right.
um, that was an era that we kind of, our parents and foreparents had to deal with.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, I have a young someone's on the line sharing that their mom was born in 1929 as well. Remember, guys, I can't see your name, so I would love to know who put that comment in there, because that's how what we do here. We try to connect people that have a lot of things in common, and what I call synergy is just keeping us connected. And how we stay connected through our stories. And this is the reason why we're doing the Sharon Lee Briefing podcast show, because a lot of people know, Honorable Carl Snowden, but a lot of people don't. And that's something that we have to always keep at the top of our heads. That don't make the assumption just because of whatever titles we may have or may have had that everyone knows us. And this is why we have to make sure that we share this out, especially to the next generation, so they can understand how things started and why they're doing, and also going through some of the things that we kind of went through in the past in the 60s. So Maria, thank you for sharing that. Maria is the Maryland president for the Maryland chapter of American Mothers that we have built some connections with across the country with the National American Mother. So I'm so glad that you're here. And she has like a chess group that she teaches young people. So make sure, Maria, you share this out to your network as well. So, all right, Honorable Snowden, we heard a little bit about your siblings. We heard a bit about where you were from. We heard a little bit about your parents. Now we're going to jump into that professional side of you. You shared at the top of the show all of your wonderful titles, but guys, there's a lot of other titles you have, and you have had over the years. For those who saw the video production that we shared at the top of the show, I call y'all those introverts, or extroverts that likes to look at things. But there's a lot of introverts that like to hear it from the horse's mouth. So I want you, Mr. Honorable Snowden, to share with us all of your titles that you have, because it's so many, but I want it to come from you. I don't want to just share it. I want it all to come from you. So tell us about the titles you've held over your career as a civil rights activist.
Well, I've been an author. Obviously, I've authored a book. Some people watch clocks. I watch people is the name of the book. I have been a professor. I've actually taught at a number of colleges and universities with a focus around racism. I did a course called The Psychology of Racism, which helps people to understand what racism is and how it impacts on not only you, the individual, but the family and the community at large. I've been a member of the Annapolis City Council. I mentioned I got elected to public office, served for 12 years on the Annapolis City Council. I've worked in government at the state level. I was the civil rights director regarding the office, the Maryland Attorney General's office, their civil rights director. I've worked in local government with the county government as a member of the staff of the county executive the first woman to get elected as county executive. And I've been an activist in the community. And on top of all of that, I've been a father, uh, currently a grandfather. Uh, have seen many things in life, have met a lot of people over my career. One of the things as a journalist, I used to work for WNN radio station as well as WJZ TV. So I've met lots and lots of what people would consider to be very famous people over the years. I had
Yeah.
the opportunity to interview James Baldwin, met Mrs. Rosa Parks, had a great conversation with her. Um, the late Congressman Perrin J. Mitchell, I knew personally, had an opportunity to talk with him. Shirley Chisholm, who I worked for when she ran for president of the United States and changed really the course of politics in America, met and got a letter from, he's now passed, but Archbishop Desmond Tutu, when we waged our campaign to fight apartheid, not only in South Africa, but the apartheid that exists here in America. And what I found to be very important is, and I'm glad you're doing this program, it's important that people tell their own story
Yes, sir.
through their own voices. I've met so many people over the years that know Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968. But when you ask them, did they know that Martin Luther King Jr.'s mother was assassinated in 1974, June
Mm.
30th, 1974, and why she was assassinated? First, people were shocked to learn that she was assassinated at all. Um, and then when they look it up and find out, oh, she did die, they see this strange coincidence in life. In 1957, Martin Luther King Jr. was in Harlem, New York, signing the first book he had autographed,
Mm.
and a demented black woman stabbed him in the chest.
Oh, wow.
He gives this famous speech that had he sneezed, he would have died. In
Wow.
1957, a demented black woman stabbed Dr. King. She lived to be 99 years old.
Wow.
Dr. King only lived to be 39, but she lived to be 99 years old. And 6 years after Dr. King is assassinated, a demented black man murders his mother.
Wow.
And he's put in prison. He's now deceased, but he was there for 20 years. But people don't know how to connect those dots. It's
Yeah.
coincidental or accidental that this happened. But it's very important for us to tell a story, to be able to make sure the story is told in a manner that really reflects the people. And
Absolutely.
one of the great moments of history that many people think they know is that of Rosa Parks, the so-called Rosa Parks story. And I had an opportunity to meet with Mrs. Parks in 1984. You know, Mrs. Parks really became a national figure when she was the age of 42 years old.
Mm.
She refused to give up her seat. So imagine being in Annapolis sitting next to Mrs. Rosa Parks, and the question by a reporter is, Mrs. Parks, why did you refuse to give up your seat in 1955? And most people thought they knew the answer to the question.
Hmm.
She said at that moment really changed my perception of who she was forever. Mrs. Parks said, I refused to give up my seat because I refused to give up my dignity.
There you go.
It had nothing to do with a bus seat being given up for a white man. She understood the cause was much bigger than that. And so it is when you run into people who are the history makers, you learn that they have a different interpretation. One of the one of the things that is just it's a misnomer, and we've got to stop this misnomer. The misnomer was that Dr. King was the head of the nonviolent civil rights movement.
Okay.
There was nothing nonviolent but the civil rights movement. It was one of the most violent periods in our lives.
Right. Right.
King used the tactic of nonviolence, but the civil rights movement itself was a very violent movement. People died, people were
Yes.
murdered, people were literally killed. There's a couple that many may not have heard of. His name was Harry Moore. He and his wife was organizers down in Florida, and they were trying to register black people to vote. And in 1951, Christmas Day,
Mm.
Day, they murdered this couple. They were celebrating their 25th anniversary, and
Wow.
Klansmen went in and murdered them. Um, and everyone knows that Emmett Till was a victim. He was murdered.
Right.
14-year-old boy. So the notion that somehow this was a nonviolent movement is a misnomer. It's somebody else trying to interpret for us what our experiences were. Nonviolence was a tactic that was used.
Right.
The movement was anything less than, it was a very violent, probably one of the most violent periods of American history.
So as a civil rights baby, learning a lot about this movement, I didn't learn it through my school when I was growing up in Calvert County. I graduated in 1982. It wasn't until decades later that I started wanting to have enough passion to learn about my history, where I would read books and read about Dr. Martin Luther King and read about all the things that had happened. What struck me is that, God, why did you want me, Sharon Parker, a civil rights baby, to love herself enough to say, well, let me tell my little small speck of a story. And I'm sharing that because there's a hashtag that my audience know me for, and it's called the Power of Five. The Power of Five to me means, everyone knows five means grace from God, and it also means power. And I talk about my journey in my book called True Synergy Work, which is connecting people, leading from within, which is bringing people together, the 7 defining principles of knowing themselves to birth greatness. But before I could teach people about that, I had to learn about me. So that Power of Five for me was when I was 5 years old in 1968. I was playing on the church ground in my hometown of Calvert County. And I asked God a question. Why was it that people of color were not liked by others? That was in 1968. Expecting an answer, didn't receive it. Okay, went back to playing around. 4 decades later, 40 years, I started, researching African American history and culture. And the light bulb came on. The light bulb was God. I felt like God was answering my question, which was, Sharon, people of color are not liked by others because we're great. People are scared of greatness. They're scared of people that, are innately, born with gifts and talents and tools. So they somehow try to control them. And unfortunately, as we can see in 2022, it's still happening. So Mr. Snowden, I want to get into, and thanks for sharing all of that intellectual knowledge with us about the history behind Rosa Parks, behind, Dr. Martin Luther King, and behind his mother, what happened. And then the confusion that even Blacks still have amongst themselves on how not to look at one another, to hurt one another because they don't understand stuff. So thanks for sharing that. But I want to share something. Back in 1970, you were doing a lot. And I definitely don't want to forget about that FBI thing. So I want you to share with us, because the audience, don't know that. A lot of audience don't know that story yet. But before we get into that story, I'm going to have Chris, if she could bring up a little commercial for us. I want you all to tune into this commercial. I want y'all to pay attention because I want you to win a gift. I want you to really learn about Honorable Snowden's background, and I'm going to ask you a question, and then if you get this question right, then you will be able to win a gift. So Chris, if you could bring up our promo video about the 5-year book anniversary, I would really appreciate that.
Synergy, energy, living legends are reaching me, sharing knowledge with you and me, teaching us how to lead with Sharon Lee. Sharon Lee. On the run. Sharon Lee. On the run.
Chapter 5. My Mother's Story, The Parker Estate. There is an old saying that when you go home, your family will take you in and care for you. But what if there isn't a home to go back to? Sharon Parker. Thinking of
Synergy, energy, living legends are reaching me, sharing knowledge with you and me, teaching us how to lead with Sharon Lee.
Thank you, Chris. Guys, as Honorable Snowden said, you got to share your own story. Okay. We may not be Channel 9. We may not be on the OWN show. We may not be, on Netflix yet. Okay. But you got to keep on promoting yourself and sharing your story. And I like to do that with the Power of Five because it's all about the community and my civil rights baby stories. So here's the question, guys. We got a few people out there. I want y'all to please be tuned in. Honorable Snowden shared where he was born. Can you tell us exactly what state Honorable Snowden was born in? It should be easy, guys. If you can tell us where he was born, what I would love to do is give you a free seat at the third season graduation class of the Leading Within Through Project Management coaching program that I have launched 3 seasons ago. We're going to have our third season stakeholders meeting, and you get to sit in the room and win. Okay, someone is put your name. I see somebody responding. If you put the name in the comments, please, please, please put your name beside it so that I can know who you are. I see the answer, but not the name of the person. So I'm going to show the first one that came up. Someone said Baltimore, Maryland. Okay, so who put that comment in there? Please share. And then you will be the winner. There's a banner behind me, guys. It says the Leading Within Coaching Program. Everything starts with, knowing how to plan and bring a team together. The Power Five, Maria, I'm not surprised, Maria. Congratulations. Now, unfortunately, Maria, you're part of that coaching program. So you will be presenting to the community your project. So you can't win, but you can definitely. I'm glad you were able to put it in there. Thank you for sharing that. Lisa Mae Crawford, you are the winner. Again, I apologize, Maria, because you're part of the students in the coaching program. So congratulations, Lisa. I will be sending you an invite. We're going to have the ceremony actually in February of 2023, but it's a coaching program that I teach the communities, not just to speak, how to build team management, but also how to birth successful projects. As Honorable Snowden said, it's about you telling your story. And you got to start with knowing how to have certain skill sets. So thank you and congratulations. So Honorable Snowden, I'm going to put something on the screen. And I want you to tell us a little bit about what this meant to you. You've been part of a lot of protests. But before we jump into this one, I want you to share with us. You shared a story with me how, as a child, you were in a protest for a cause. Share with us what that cause was and how did that impact your life?
The year is 1970. It's 2 years after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. It's 5 years after the assassination of Malcolm X. For those who remember this is a post-civil rights movement. This is the 70s. This is dawn of what's called the Black Consciousness movement. So in 1970, I was a high school student at Annapolis High School, and we were seeking to learn more about our history. Wanted to know more about our history, Black history. And at Annapolis High School, African Americans made up about a fourth of the student population at that time. It was shortly after so-called integration. So in 1970, it's about 1,500 students that attended Annapolis High School at the time, and they're having some call an assembly. And the school was so large that yet they have assemblies in session. So the first session was a session that was held at what was called Merlin Hall, which is part of the complex. And on this particular day, students had gathered, and a program was being put forward, and they had a country and western band playing some country and western music. So some student, Black, within the group shouted, "Can we have some soul music?" And the president of the Student Government Association, who happened to be white, responded by saying, "This is our assembly. We've organized this assembly. We're going to play the music we want to play. And if you don't like it, you can leave." When he made that pronouncement, you could hear a pin drop. It took me about 5 seconds to realize he was right. I didn't like what was going on. So I got up to leave. And in those days, they had these seats that when you got up, it flapped up. And, the place is dark because the lights are down. So I'm getting up to leave, and my seat flaps up, and I'm walking out of the auditorium, and all of a sudden, all you could hear is these seats flapping up, one after another. And before we knew it, 150 black students had walked out of this assembly. And that began to be a demonstration of what occurred. It would last for 2 weeks at Annapolis High School, where black students refused to go to class. They would show up, but we would have what's called teach-ins. And we would then have either students or others tell us about Black history and the great heroes of that day,
Mhm.
uh, and learn a lot about Malcolm X, um, read his autobiography while we're doing this protest movement. That protest and the fact that we wanted to have a Black Studies program would later lead to a major disruption at the school, and 14 of us was expelled. And I was one of the students that got expelled from Annapolis High School,
Wow.
participating in this boycott of classes. Um, as fate would have it, the superintendent of schools was a man named Edward Anderson, and he told my mother in my presence that as long as he is the superintendent for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, I would never attend another public school in Anne Arundel County. And it turned out he kept his promise. I was never able to attend public schools in Anne Arundel County.
Wow.
As fate would have it, however, there's a private school in Annapolis called the Key School. People raised money, and I was able to complete my education as a result of going to a private school called the Key School. But those
Wonderful.
demonstrations was the first that I was involved in as a teenager.
That is amazing. Wow. So, the stories, we're not finished with this story, guys. We're not finished with this story because even though it is real, a lot of things happen to you. And I'm going to share another little comment on here, and I want you to tell us about what's this all about. So, talk to us about what happened.
Well, as this pointed out, actually, it was 15 years old when the FBI, there's a program that was in the 70s called the Counterintelligence Program. This is a national program that was launched by J. Edgar Hoover all over the country. And what it was designed to do was keep um, activists under surveillance
Mm,
and build files up on them. So at the age of 15 years of age, the FBI opened up a file on me. I'm one of the few Marylanders, if the only Marylander, that ever won a lawsuit against the FBI. The FBI
wow.
had kept me under surveillance up until the age of 24. We would
Okay.
sue the FBI in 1976. A civil rights attorney by the name of Alan Liggum took the case, went all the way up to a federal district court, and we won $10,000, had our files expunged. But something more important than that happened. I understood how government works and how it can be used as a tool against people who it has a difference of point of view on.
Hmm.
Worked in government, I would just tell people to take seriously um, threats. Do not assume that because somebody makes a threat that it cannot be carried out.
Right.
And you have government involved. Government has a huge amount of resources. And one of the things I tell people who are interested in this part of history, because we did this deliberately, when we won the lawsuit against the FBI, I donated that entire FBI file to the ACLU. So if you go to the Maryland ACLU website, you can look and see the kind of stuff they kept. So
Wonderful.
remember, at the time, I'm only 15, 16 years old, but the FBI followed me. They kept me under surveillance. Anything I wrote, they preserved. And one of the things that, ironically, for me at least, because it was not the intention of the FBI to do this, but it turned out to be a great favor to me. As I mentioned earlier, Sharon, I used to interview people. I was part of a radio station, and I
Mhm.
interviewed a lot of people. And as fate would have it, In 1976, I interviewed uh, Stokely Carmichael, who later became known as Kwame Ture. But Stokely Carmichael, I interviewed him, had an opportunity to sit down. We had a 1 hour discussion, un, unfiltered discussion. We talked about everything, and I'm recording the conversation with Stokely Carmichael.
Mm.
Unbeknownst to me, the FBI was hearing everything we were saying, and they wrote this transcription. So I have this interview, which I pride, with Stokely Carmichael. Thanks to the FBI, they preserved it. There was a transcript made of it. It was in my FBI file. And so when people go over to ACLU website, look at the file, they're going to see all kinds of stuff in that file. One of the things that they will discover, because we gave the entire file, because I want people to see what their government was doing to people, teenagers. Can you
Yes.
imagine the FBI following a 14, 15-year-old boy to Lover's Lane? There was a place in Annapolis called Jonas Green where a teenager would go and meet. And the FBI really went there. They recorded the whole thing.
Wow. That's amazing. Guys, look, I'm gonna tell you, I told y'all earlier, we laugh, we learn, and we lead here. And sometimes you just have to laugh at all of those efforts that so many people took against people of color to just kind of quiet them from one having a voice, unquiet their voice so that they couldn't bring people together. But God, if it was not for him constantly pouring into us to let us know that you are somebody, I got your back. I'm going to protect you. Keep on doing what you're doing. So for leaders like Honorable Carl Snowden, I again applaud you. I could listen to you all day. Unfortunately, we only have an hour, and we got to. We definitely want to get to the rest of your professional side. So I'm going to also share this with the audience. After you tell us a little bit about this platform and why you created it. Then we're going to get into your on the run story, and then we're going to find out what's coming up next for you. And gosh, you all want to be tuned in because 2023 is going to be the year. If I didn't mention it earlier, but the topic of this podcast show is from protest to progress. Y'all saw it on the flyer, but it's going to all come together at the end of the show why we're sharing so much wonderful information with you all now. So please, please, please stay connected. Honorable Snowden, tell us about your association. You've already shared a lot of history from behind the scenes in a sense of what you were doing to work with leaders in the community, organizations in the community, protesting initiatives. So is that what inspired you to actually create your own business?
Actually, a blind professor. Uh, I told you I'm a graduate of Lincoln University, and not atypical of lectures when you have a professor. He got up, he was blind, as I mentioned, and he said that so many people spend their lives. At the end of their life, they said, I should have, I could have, I would have, I wanted to, but it's too late. They have not fulfilled their dreams. So the Professor Z was his name. He said, if you got dreams, you need to capture those dreams, live them out. He said the thing that can happen with people, so many people are frightened to fail. You try something, you want to be, quote, safe. But he said that's not how dreams are captured. So he talked about, I was 32 years old at the time, and he talked about what do you want to do? 10 years from now, what do you want to do? At the time, I was working for a agency. The woman who was the executive director, I was a chief program officer, second in command, but she wasn't going to be going anywhere anytime soon. And it was at that point I decided what I want to do is open my own business. And I created Carl Snowden and Associates. I was told by many people, "You're crazy. Don't do that. You don't have your work plan." The whole thing. Suffice it to say that I'm one of the few businesses, black or white, in the state of Maryland that ever got profiled in the Wall Street Journal because the business I came up with was an unusual business, but a needed one. There are a lot of people who've read into racism and sexism and sexual harassment, ageism every single day, and they didn't know what to do about it. Well, I'd spent a lot of time learning what to do about it. So I opened up the business, and its focus was to help people to be able to address the systemic sexism and racism that they would encounter. And so I joined up with the ACLU, and for a decade, the decade of the 80s, we brought lawsuits, voting rights lawsuits, all across the state of Maryland, including Annapolis, where we were able to win these lawsuits and give people of color an opportunity for the first time to be able to be represented in their local government. So
Mm.
Cheverly, Maryland, which we were successful in, or Cambridge, Maryland, or Dorchester, or even in Annapolis. We were very successful in getting people to be able to win these voting rights cases and subsequently become members of local government entities. And as pointed out here, I myself, when I became an alderman in the city of Annapolis, I introduced legislation that prohibited private clubs from being able to discriminate against people based on their race and their color. And believe it or not, if you ever come to Annapolis, there is a district court. It's called the Robert F. Sweeney District Court. Where that court exists used to be where the private Elks, 1,500 members, all white, used to be at that location. When I was on the city council, we passed legislation that prohibited private clubs from getting alcoholic beverage licenses. So, because that particular group, the Elks, did not want to conform with the new law, they literally sold their building and moved to the county where this law would not have to apply to them. And of course, what happened as a result of that is we now have a district court at the very location where racism was allowed to flourish. And this one that talked about Arthur Trussell in the Housing Authority, we were able to successfully, he was someone who was corrupt, and we were able to successfully move him from public office and be able to make those changes. One of the things I'd like to share with the group, and this is why it's so important with history, if you ask the average person about Vice President Harris, they will tell you that Vice President Harris is an African-American woman who was the first to bring what's called a blended family into the White House. It's called a blended family because her husband and her children are white.
Okay.
And they brought a blended family. But that's not true. She's not the first to do that. The first to do that goes to a man named Robert Mentor Johnson. Who was Robert Mentor Johnson? He was the vice president under a guy named Martin Van Buren. Martin Van Buren served one term. And the reason why he served only one term, he lost the election, was because his vice president, Richard Mentor Johnson, who was from Kentucky, married a black woman.
Mm.
He paused there. Married a black woman. This is unheard of. Had two black daughters. And most people watching this program had never heard of Richard Mentor Johnson, or
I
that
know I didn't.
it's not, believe me, it's not surprising. Martin Van Buren lost an election, and the woman who had the two black daughters, if you go look it up, it's an interesting piece of history. And once you know that, then you know some other things. By the way, even though Richard Mentor Johnson had a black wife and two black daughters and was vice president of the United States, he was not the first vice president to do that. He was the first vice president that openly admitted that his wife was black. He was the first to do that. But the first vice president, who would later be president, who impregnated a black woman, was Thomas Jefferson. We
Wow.
know these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Well, he did not ever own up to the fact that he impregnated Sally Heming. So there's a lot of history, a lot need to be told. And one of the things that we're trying to do is preserve history. And one of the things I like to share with the group, because I like to get their feedback and like to get your feedback. We have built in Annapolis and in Maryland memorials to Martin Luther King Jr. We built a memorial to Coretta Scott King. We've built memorials to the civil rights foot soldiers, people who actually marched in 1963. So next, we want to build a memorial and want to do it to a Marylander. And I'd like to just get people's ideas of who that Marylander we should honor with a memorial, a statue. Believe it or not, there's no statue of Congressman Pern J. Mitchell, the first African American congressman from the state of Maryland. Should it be him? Should it be he be the one that we honor, or should it be, Wes Moore, who's going to be the first governor, who's an African American governor? Should it be uh, a woman named Verda Walcom? She was the first Maryland state uh, black state senator anywhere in the country. It happened here in this state. We've had a lot of prominent African Americans who have been able to make history. And so I'd very much like to get from your audience, who did they think it should be?
So
And we're going to announce it on January 13th. We're going to have Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration. And the keynote speaker is going to be Congressman Benny Thompson, who is now chairing the National January 6th Committee. And we'd like to make an announcement on that occasion. And so I'd very much like to get input from your audience as to who they think should be on it.
So call to action, everyone. You hear the call to action, okay? I'm so glad we got Cynthia Lane on here. Cynthia, I hope you're taking a lot of notes because we are affiliated with some different platforms. The Blacks in Government, Robert C. Weaver chapter at HUD, who Cynthia's been the secretary for us for years, and there's a lot coming up that we can even put this to the committee. Ourselves, and then other platforms. Guys, you all know I'm a former commissioner for the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. And when I say God has been good to me, he's been building that synergy for me. That theme song is no talk, it's action. It takes work to make connection with people. And I'm not sharing this for the title, I'm sharing this for the work that God allowed me to do, to just meet the right people so that you all can learn from them. Now, call to action, Mr. Snowden, Honorable Snowden, we're going to be getting back to you with who we recommend. Cynthia, let me know if you got all those names documented so we can make a choice. Just put a comment in the chat to let me know you got it. If you need us to repeat it again, we can do that. But okay, Cynthia's on it. She got it. That's what I'm talking about. All right, so guys, again, like I said, Honorable Snowden, I could talk to you all day, but I got to stay in alignment with our time. So I'm going to have Chris, if you could bring up two of our flyers, the flyer of the book and also the flyer of the coaching program. I want you to show that to the audience because I want you all to see that as much as I love technology, as much as I love collaborating and building and bringing people together, building products and tools and bringing people together, it all starts somewhere. And it starts with people like, having a team. I am celebrating my 5th year book anniversary. Again, I don't think it's by coincidence, guys, that I wrote my book in 2000, or the book was written for me in 2017. And this year, 2022, marks the 5th year, the Power of 5 year for me that my book was written. I think it's our time. I think it's time for you to tell your story even more now. I don't think it's by accident that, Honorable Snowden is on this show today, because God knows what he's doing 24/7. And it's all up to us to connect the dots. And that's what I like to do. And that's where the synergy comes in, connecting the dots. So I just wanted to share that to say, guys, continue to support the Power 5 initiative, continue to support my book. When Honorable Snowden comes back up, we're going to share a little bit about his book again. Then we're going to get into his On the Run story. Chris, if you could show the flyer of the coaching program, this is key, guys. If you want to know how I did it, how I build websites, how I, bring together people through my 9 conferences, working on my 10th conference, Power of 5 again, the 5 increments, of course, 10 in 2023, how I'm able to brand myself on social media, how I was able to find my voice, because I am an introvert. Y'all know that. I love being behind the scenes, but I had to find that skill set to become an extrovert so that I could share what all God had dumped in my head for me to share with the community. So I did it through project management. So I teach the community about how to take things out of the head, plan things effectively, and birth it into a project. Okay, this is what we're doing. So I want you all to stay very close to our platform. Mark your calendar for what's going to be coming up. I'm not going to spoil it for Honorable Snowden. I want him to tell us what's going to be a major initiative happening in 2023. But before we do that, he's going to get into his own, talk about his book, and then he's going to get into his on the run story, and then he's going to share with us what's major happening in 2023. I am not going to spoil it. So thank you, Chris, for sharing that. So, Honorable Snowden, before we get into your on the run story, tell us a little bit about your book. What's the intended purpose of your book?
My book was written in 2020, as I mentioned to you and the audience. My mother died at the age of 104 years old. My book was dedicated to her because she was an incredible woman, just an incredible woman. And she reminds me of so many Black women. When you think of the struggle that Black women have gone through, it is amazing. And so this book is a series of essays where we look at contemporary events and give our spin to it. And for your audience that's listening, here's something just so basic. And it goes to show you how, if you don't know your history, people can pull the wool over your eyes. All of you heard about how the Supreme Court had denied women the right to vote. The women the right to reproductive rights, that women had lost the right to determine what to do with their bodies. That story was told to us. This is the first time in the history of the Supreme Court that women lost the right to determine what to do with their bodies. It's not true. It's not true. White women lost that right. Black women lost that right with the Dred Scott decision. The Dred Scott decision that was handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court said that Black people had no rights that white people were bound to respect. And what that meant legally was that Black women could be raped, and they were. Black women could be impregnated, and they were. Black women could be forced to bring to birth the child of a rapist, and they were.
What year was that?
This is in 1857.
Okay.
It's Dred Scott decision. It's a famous decision. Roger Taney was the chief judge, who happened to be from the state of Maryland, that wrote a decision called the Dred Scott decision. But Black women lost the right to determine what could do with their bodies. But because they were just Black women, they're telling us now that white women have lost that right, that it's the first time. I just want people to know it's not the first time. So it's that kind of interpretation of history that is important. And then lastly, and this goes from Maya Angelou. I met Maya Angelou, and one of the things I just want to share in closing, brilliant woman. I'm so honored to have met Maya Angelou. And what Maya Angelou once told Oprah Winfrey is what I share with people now. Oprah Winfrey said to Maya Angelou said to Oprah Winfrey, "There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your hair. There's nothing wrong with the color of your skin. There's nothing even wrong with your weight," because she was overweight at the time. What Maya Angelou said is you've got to believe in God. And once you believe in God, God makes no mistakes. There's nothing wrong with you. Just be who God intended you to be, and you can do anything you want.
Thank you for sharing that. That is amazing, guys. This is a fabulous show. I am so honored. I know you are leaving some great comments. I appreciate you. We have a few minutes. Honorable Snowden, we're going to get into your on the run story, but I can see why you've been on the run for a long time. You got so many great things you're doing and you've done for people, especially the underserved and disadvantaged. And that's an amazing thing. But do you have a particular on the run story you would like to share?
Again, I want to reiterate for your audience, please give consideration to giving us who you think we should lift up by way of creating this memorial. Remember, our children, it's about the future generation, need to know not only who Malcolm was and who Martin was, but they also need to know our heroes and sheroes here in Maryland. So what we want to do is create this memorial to some worthy African-American who people in this audience believe should be honored. And by the way, there are many, many people who've done great things here in Maryland.
Yes.
But we need to lift them up. While Thurgood Marshall was wonderful, while Kunta Kinte was wonderful, there have been other people who have done incredible work, and they've not been recognized. And we want to make sure they get recognized. So we're going to make the announcement on January 13th based on what we get from you, from your audience and others,
Yes,
on
sir.
who we'll be honoring.
Awesome. So your on the run story. Give us what were you? Give us something maybe personal that you may consider. Be transparent. On the run story for you.
Um, I'll tell you what I tell audiences all the time. Most people, if you ask most people, what does love mean? They say love means, some affection that you have for people. And if you have someone, and I used to teach this course, Psychology of Racism. The next time you run into somebody who says, I love you, just ask them this one question. Why?
Mm.
Says, I love you because of the way you smile or the way you walk or the way you talk. They don't really love you because all of those things can happen. The way you walk, the way you talk. What happens if you lose the ability to walk? What
Yeah.
happens if you lose the ability to talk? What
Yes.
happens if you lose your teeth and you don't have the same smile or the same figure?
Yes.
Allow people to say they love you because of how you look, because that will change over time. If they say they love you because they got this kindred spirit with you, that's real love. And for those who've lived long enough, I know they've had people look them in the eye and say, I love you, and be with another woman or man the next day. So we know how that works.
That's amazing, guys. So Honorable Snowden is telling y'all guys his on the run story is he's running away from love because he got to make sure y'all know what love is, right?
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. Now we want to find out what's coming up next for you. What's happening? And something as big is happening in 2023, guys. And I've been just stumping up and down, waiting to share this with you all. Can you tell us what's happening with the caucus of the African American leaders? What are you all working on in 2023? And what else is happening for you in 2023?
Right. Just real quickly for the people who see my email address up, if you're interested, every Monday morning from 9 to 10, a group of African Americans across the state of Maryland meet, and we have a discussion among ourselves. But what issues are impacting our community? If you're interested, you're free to join us in those particular discussions. They're really focused about how we can work. And here's the example we use. And if you're not into this, you shouldn't come to this group. There are two types of insects. I told you I grew up on a farm. You have a bumblebee and you have a hornet. Bumblebees are bigger than hornets. And what you can do literally with a bumblebee, if you got 1,000 bumblebees, you can kill one bumblebee at a time, and no bumblebee will interfere. Sounds
Hmm.
familiar?
Yes.
A hornet's nest is different. You put your hand on one hornet, you got all them hornets to deal with. They're organized. They take a threat against one as a threat against the community, and they responded accordingly. So we're building in 2023 the Hornet movement, where people will understand that if you put your hands wrongly on any African American anywhere in this nation, we want to be able to respond. And lastly, I told this to your assistant, Crystal, for people who've not read this story, and it's the vast majority of people watching have not, they should Google the city of Philadelphia apologizes to Black people. Google
Hmm.
city of Philadelphia apologize to Black people, and then ask yourself one simple question after you read what the apology is about. Why didn't you know this? Why didn't Black leadership across this country share what had happened in Philadelphia? By the way, the apology was just last month, and the
Wow.
vast majority of people watching this program will not even have heard of it. Will not have heard of it. So we're going to, in 2023, be raising the consciousness of people, making sure that people understand that the stars have aligned themselves. And one of the things that Dick Gregory used to often say, and it's absolutely true, that there is a power in the universe that put wetness and water, blue in the sky, and allows birds to fly. Once you get into that power, you don't have anything to worry about. Nothing, nothing. But again, it's called the city of Philadelphia apologizes to Black people. And when you read what that apology is, those of you who live in Maryland, those of you who are near any hospital or university, ask yourself if it could happen in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. What do you think's been happening in Maryland?
Of course. Woo. Well, so I have on the screen now. I've been talking to the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture with the group that you're leading, the Caucus of the African American Leaders. You all are working on some initiatives in 2023, and I believe it marks the 50th
That's
anniversary of the March on Washington. Is that correct?
that is correct, and there'll be more with this forthcoming. But we want to um, commemorate the March on Washington in 1963 to take place in August of next year, where we're going to have a celebration. 60 years ago, Martin King Jr. had a dream. 60 years later, we can literally measure how successful that dream has been in our county, Anne Arundel County, during the last midterm election. For the first time in the history of Anne Arundel County, we elected the first sheriff, black sheriff of this county, first black register of wills, and then in the state of Maryland, elected the first black attorney general, Anthony Brown, and the first black governor, Wes Moore. That is not by accident. That's not by happenstance. It's because this 26-year-old preacher, when he first came into being, Martin Luther King Jr. said to those who gathered in 1955, Sister Rosa, it is better that we walk in dignity, he said, than ride in shame. And in 1963, he would again eloquently tell this nation that we have a check that has not been cashed. It has come back with insufficient funds. And he has argued, correctly so, that we do not believe the nation is bankrupt when it comes to our civil rights and our human rights. So we're going to be celebrating that spirit, that theme in August of 2023, and would invite everyone who's listening to be part of this great moment in history.
Okay, you can take it to the bank. This is going to be shared, and shared some more. So this is a legacy platform that we're going to keep on sharing. We just want to know, how can people connect with you? You shared earlier via your website, but they want to also connect with you on social media. I know you're on Facebook. Are you on Instagram?
I am.
LinkedIn. Can you share with us thank you for sharing that. Chris, also, what's your Instagram? Do you know your Instagram handle?
Carl Snowden.
Carl Smith, guys, go and Google it. I mean, I said Smith. I'm Carl Snowden. Forgive me. Look, where did Carl Smith come from? I don't know. Honorable Carl Snowden. But when you look for him on Instagram, just look for Carl Snowden. You'll find him on Facebook. You'll find him on Instagram. I am extremely happy for this interview. You have made my dream come true because, as I mentioned, the end of the month, is the last day of the celebration of the 2022 5-year for my book, and you have made my dream come true. Just to share all the legacy that you shared is what I live for. Have someone like you in today's time that can speak history, speak it for fact because you were there, is what we in the community needs. So you have given me an early, holiday gift that's going to go down in history for me because you made my day. Honorable Carl Snowden, thank you for an outstanding interview. I want you to stay behind a couple of seconds. We're a little bit over our time, but guess what? It's my podcast show, so we can do it. Okay. So I want you to stay behind a little. We're going to do a picture with you in the green room. I want to thank all of our guests who showed up. I want to thank Deborah Brown for and I can't. Why am I getting out of a blank for your last name, Harris? Deborah Brown Harris for showing up. She was our podcast guest last week. Did a phenomenal job. I want to thank Cynthia Lang. I want to thank Maria Thorpe. I want to thank Lisa Bev Washington. I want to thank Lisa Crawford for joining us. Guys, share this. Guys, I'm just overwhelmed right now, guys. Look, have a wonderful, wonderful Friday. Have a safe weekend. Continue to follow Honorable Carl Snowden on his platform. Join his initiative because, guys, we are about changing the world for the better. We don't go low, we go high, and that's what Michelle Obama wants for us to do, and that's what we're going to continue to do. Education is power. Knowing yourself is even more powerful. Tell your story. Love yourself. Guys, you all have a great weekend. Thank you. Only Great Media Production, Krista Glenn again. Thank you, Sean Parker. Thank you, Dana Parker, for being sponsors. Thank you again, Lisa Dove Washington. I will be seeing Lisa at her event. She's having an event in Waldorf tomorrow where she's honoring hidden figures in the community as well. So like I mentioned earlier, Honorable Snowden, stay in touch with her too, because she is one to, help us get our name out there and share the shine with the community and also with the country. So just keep that in mind. Guys, I love y'all. Have a wonderful day. Mr. Snowden, stay behind. We're doing some pictures. Guys, have a great time. Thank you, Chris. And you can close us out.
Synergy, energy, living legends are reaching me. Sharing knowledge with you and me, teaching us how to lead with Sharon Lee.